All right, how's it going, everyone? So I'm back at it with another video where we are going to be building an Omegle, or is it Omegle? I don't know how to say it, clone. Super basic. This is like a prototype, but it does use some cool technology to basically have different laptops connect to each other. Over on my left here, I have another laptop set up, which is connecting to random rooms on that are stored in MongoDB Atlas. I have some data that's stored there, and I can basically alternate between rooms, and we can actually send chat messages between different people, right? So I can just go ahead and set up in like hello, and that'll actually send out a message to the other laptop, and on the other laptop, I'll type a message. And those are all communicating with the Agora service. I want to say this video is sponsored by Agora, and we're going to be using some of the technology that they provide to basically set up the live webcam chat and also the real-time messaging between the different laptops of these chat rooms. And then also audio works as well. I have the audio turned off because there's just a bunch of echo, but these two laptops and whoever else on the internet can actually talk to each other with their webcams and using their audio with the Agora SDKs and services. And I do have all this stuff hosted on Vercel. I'll show you how to deploy that real quick at the end of this video. And I'm using MongoDB Atlas to store some of this metadata to know which rooms are open and which ones are in use. And I'm using Next.js to basically build this out. I think that might be it. So if you guys are interested in checking this out and watching how this is done, be sure to stick around. Let's just go ahead and jump over and see how this is done and start coding it live together. All right, so let's just go ahead and get started. I went ahead and already created a Next application using the built-in create Next app tooling that's available. If you just read through the docs, you basically run this command. It asks if you want TypeScript. I said yes. And then it generates this project for you. I also have all this code uploaded to a GitHub repository, which is located at github.com/Omegle clone. So if you want to check out the code there, I'll put it in the description. This is where we're going to be committing and pushing code to. But let's just go ahead and see if we can get started with, I guess, first of all, we want to kind of think at a higher level. What are we building? What are we designing? And I think if you just go to excalibur.com and just delete all this stuff, let's just start with a really basic design. So I like to start as simple as possible and then build upon it. In this case, what does Omegle look like? Well, they have like a header. This, which isn't even important to add in. The meat and potatoes of the app is they have a webcam display here and a webcam display here. So one of them is your webcam, the other one is the person you're connected to, right? And then they also have a chat box like so, which I believe you can type in some information. There's also like a skip button, or I think it's called like next. So if you don't want to like talk to this person, you can just skip them and just talk to someone else. You can also type into here. And then we also have like a submit button. So I'll just go here and type in submit. A little bit too big. Let's just go ahead and, actually it's a little bit too small. Let's just go ahead and scale it up a little bit. And this is like, hi, hello, how are you? That's kind of like what we're building. And obviously this would be like a person. So I don't know if I have any cool icons. All right, so we have, let's just put like a person icon here. This would be like a person talking. This will be a webcam as well. And then we'd have some chat. So like you'd have an icon of a person here. Maybe you can add some cool designs with like a circle like that. And then it says like, what is up? You know, just like a typical like chat box functionality. Like so. And it basically just randomly finds someone to connect you to. So that's kind of like a high level design of like what we're building. Now in terms of the database, like what would we need to store in the database to know that someone is like waiting for a connection, right? Because if you're the first one to join this application, there's no one to connect to, right? So the UI kind of needs to sit there and wait until it can match you up to someone else and you can actually have that live chat with them. So I think the database will be pretty straightforward. I mean, you probably have a table, and that table might have a room ID or something. And then also you'd probably have like a status. So like it could be like a waiting status or talking or done or something, or just delete it when it's done. So basically the idea is like you'd have a different room ID. So you could have like a 1 ID and you could have a waiting. There might be more stuff we have to add to our database. But basically, when you load up the app and you click that next button, the idea is you have to search through your database, find an entry that's currently in the waiting state, and randomly pick one. And then that's the one you'd connect to. You connect to the user who is also currently waiting. And if you hit next, it's either going to find another entry that's waiting, or it's going to create a new one so that someone else can connect to you. That's what I have the idea in my head with. I don't know if it'll work out, but again, always iterate upon your solutions, and then you can, build upon it and make it better. So as far as components, I feel like this guy has two main components, and we're going to be using Agora, which has an RTM library and an RTC, real-time chat and real-time messaging. So this is going to be built with real-time messaging, and this one over here, the webcam stuff, will be built with RTC. So there's going to be two different libraries we use with two different connections, and we'll figure that out. But I think it'd be easiest to start off with building out the messenger. So how do you actually talk to people? And I've done this before, so we'll probably be looking at some reference code. But let's just go ahead and jump into the code base and try to figure out some of this stuff. Also, the database I'm planning to use is MongoDB Atlas. This is a free service you can potentially use to connect and store these rooms that we're going to be doing. Okay, so let's just go to the next app, and first of all, let's just run it, make sure it runs successfully. So go ahead and type npm run dev, and I will go to localhost 3000, which should load this up. Now we have our next application running. I do plan to host this on Vercel, hopefully in this video. So if you don't know how to do that, it should be pretty straightforward to watch. So first of all, we want a page that shows probably a waiting, so just waiting. And that could potentially be like the main index. So if you go to index.js, inside of Next.js, if you don't know how some of this stuff works, basically, let me delete all this and I'll kind of explain. I'm sure a lot of you already know how Next works. You don't need the overview. But again, I'm making this for other beginners who might not know how this stuff works. So when you have a file here, such as index.tsx, Next is going to map that file to a corresponding route in your browser's URL. So for index, since this is in the top level directory of pages, when you go to just slash, or you don't even add a slash, that is going to load up the index page. Okay, so notice so I go here and I type inside of main, I type in like hello and click save, you'll see hello pop up here. That's pretty cool. So it uses file-based routing, and this is the main page we're going to be using to basically show a waiting spinner until you actually get a connection that you can connect to. And I don't know how many pages we're going to need. We might not even need that many. We could just have one main page. But let's start off with this page. So the first thing we want to do is we want to basically connect to our API. And we need to see, hey, is there already a person who is looking to chat? Is there a entry in that database table that we kind of talked about that has a status of waiting? Okay, so what we could potentially do is maybe we should start with the API first and connect it all to Mongoose. So in the API, I'm going to make a new file called /rooms. And basically, this is also file-based routing. So if I, in my URL, go to /API/rooms, that's actually going to hit this file here. And this file is going to process the request. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And actually, I can show you that if I just go ahead and refresh this page and go to API rooms, you should see it give back John Doe. So that's how the API stuff works with Next.js. It's the same file-based routing. You can kind of intercept requests, do some stuff, and send back some responses. Okay, so we first of all need to connect to MongoDB when someone hits this API, and we need to return a random room that has a status of waiting. Okay, so we haven't connected our thing or our application to Mongo yet, so we probably need to do that. Let's go to Mongo Atlas. And we're going to go ahead and we already have a cluster created. If you go to databases and you create a cluster, which is, I believe, this green create button, I believe you can create one free cluster for your free account. And I'm going to go ahead and click on connect. And I'm going to go ahead and click connect your application. So I'll click this, and then we should be able to do Node.js 4.1 or later. Go ahead and copy this. And we probably have to create a username and password. So we'll do that in just a second. But we're going to go to our .env file, which I don't think we even have one yet. So with Next.js and most Node applications, you have to specify like secrets and other private information inside a .env file so that you don't accidentally commit this to your repo. And in this example, we need to basically set up that connection that has the username and password for a cluster inside of this .env file so that we can reference it with our code later on. So let's go back to Mongo Atlas and create a username and password. Go ahead and go to database access down here. I'm going to delete some of these. I think they're old. I don't even know if this one's needed anymore. Admin, delete that. Hopefully it's not needed. I'm going to click add new database user, and we're going to do password. I'm going to go ahead and just auto generate one, and we're going to call the user admin. Actually, I'll call this like Omegle admin, something like that. And let's show the password, and we're going to copy both the password and the username directly into those brackets so that we can use them in our connection. And make sure we go down here and we click add user. Now, I think this should hopefully work. As long as I save this .env file, I'm going to go ahead and just delete all these extra lines so that we don't have random blank lines here. Now, we call this Mongo URL, so that's the key that we can use when accessing that secured URL. Now, when it comes to setting up mongoose, I found an example blog post article, right? So I'm going to follow this because I've done it in the past, but it's pretty straightforward. You basically just install mongoose. So if I go over to my terminal here and just go ahead and install mongoose. And while that's installing, I'm going to make a dbconnect.js file inside a lib directory. So I'm going to say libs, and then I'll make a db connect dot. I'll make it TypeScript since we're trying to do this all in TypeScript. And then we are going to go ahead and just paste in all of this information like this. Now, there are some things that we're going to have to do a little bit differently because I think we called it MongoDB URL. So maybe we should go back to the .env and just rename this to URI so that we can access that properly from here. And I do believe you have to restart your server whenever you change your .env file. So I'm going to go ahead to go to the bottom and just go ahead and like restart this so that it loads in the newest values. So what does this thing do and why do we have to have this file? Basically, when you're running development mode, every time you save a page, Next is going to like reload that page, which means it's going to reconnect to your database every single time you save a file. And at some point you start getting random errors saying like too many connections. So this is like a little workaround for when you're trying to connect to databases when you're doing local development with Next.js so that it will cache your mongoose connection and it won't continuously connect to it over and over. You have to do the same thing with like SQLize. I think you have to do the same thing with like Prisma as well, potentially. But it's basically a way to like not run into random errors when you're doing local development. There are some issues. I think they're just like TypeScript warnings potentially, so maybe we should be able to get around these and not bother with them. But let's go back to our API, our rooms endpoint, and what we want to do is we want to fetch back every single room that exists in a rooms collection. Okay? And we can do that using dbconnect. So let's just continue following this little tutorial. Basically, he's saying create a user model. In our case, we want to make, I think he makes like a models directory. And inside of here, you can make a rooms.es. Maybe keep the convention he's doing capital R for rooms, since you know it's kind of like a model. And then I'm going to copy this mongoose schema. So what does mongoose actually do? It's basically a helper utility for connecting to a MongoDB database, and it allows you to define schemas. Why do you need a schema? Well, basically, you don't want anyone to just put whatever arbitrary data into your database, especially if you don't have checks, right? For example, we're saying that someone can enter a name and an email into the schema. But if you don't define this schema, someone who's malicious could basically just send giant payloads to your database and fill up your database really quick, because they could add a name, an email, and then they could also add 30 other fields that are like thousands and thousands of characters long, right? So you want a schema, you want some type of validation against your database entries so that malicious users don't basically break your system. Okay, so I'm going to rename some stuff. I'm going to call it a room schema. And we really just need like a name. Actually, we don't even need a name. We really just needed like an auto incrementing ID. in a status. So I'm going to put a status here, and that could be a string. And here I'll put room. Just rename everywhere it says user to room. And I think this looks pretty good. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue reading through and see how they do it, right? So they're saying in the API directory /users, you could basically import this stuff and connect to your schema and start doing some stuff. So we're going to try to follow that as well. So inside of here, we're going to go ahead and just paste in some of this code. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, paste that in. I'm going to cut out these imports and put them at the top, like so. And I think we also want to copy some of this. So I'm going to go ahead and just like cut this out and make sure it has async there. All right, so this looks pretty good, although it's complaining that it cannot find models /user. Well, that's because we called it room, or we called it rooms actually. And for DB connect, I think we called it libs. So let's make sure that some of the stuff's set up correctly. In fact, I'm going to rename this to room because I think he called it just user, not rooms. Sorry for jumping around, y'all, but hopefully you guys are following along. So this is complaining, for some reason, has no default export. So I think what I need to do is, first of all, I'm going to try to change this to be export default. Like that. Hopefully that works. And then we should be able to import it. Okay, we're just coding with some trial and error. We should at least get something at some point. So we want to just listen for a GET request. So when someone does a GET request to this /API/room, Room's API endpoint, we basically want to connect to the database using that DB connect function that we created here. Again, all this does is set up like a mongoose connection to that URL, and then it returns you back an object that you can use to kind of download stuff. Now we're going to check the request to see if it was a GET request. And if it was a GET request, we are going to use that room model, and we're going to find every single room that exists in our database. And then we're going to basically return all the rooms. Now, I don't know why they're doing success of true here. I'm just going to go ahead and return rooms. And then if there was an issue, I'll just go ahead and say, I'll just pass the error. Hopefully this works. And then also for the default, I'll say like no method for this endpoint. Okay, so if you try to hit this endpoint with like a post or a patch or put, like it's going to throw an error. Now it's complaining because we have data defined here, and data says that it has to be a name. Honestly, like you can make this something more specific, like room should be either an error or it could be an array. I'm just going to put any here because I'm not too strict about TypeScript. I know that'll make people cringe. I mean, if you wanted to do it properly, you could do like type room. I'll just say like response data is equal to room, make that an array, or you could do like some type of string for an error. And then over here, you have to basically type a room is equal to status of string. Okay. And then you could put response data here if you wanted to. And that's kind of a more proper way. Let me change this to error.message. I mean, error.message should have a message on it, so I don't know why that's complaining. I'll just say as string. Actually, I'll say error as any here. So I did a lot of talking, did a lot of stuff, copied, pasted code. What's actually going on here? And is this actually working? Let's find out. So we're going to go and load up Thunder Client, and we're going to make a new request to our API. So I'll say HTTP localhost. I think we're at 3000. Let's go over to where we're at. Let me pin this so I don't lose it. I usually make the first tab in my browser equal to the application. So actually, we don't even need to use Thunder Client or anything. I'll just say API/rooms, and that should return us some JSON if everything is set up. Now, this is complaining because it looks like we are passing things that are not available And this usually happens when you copy code that's like old. So if you go back to this blog post, when was this written? 2021. So this code could be a little bit old. And what we're gonna have to do is just Google why this is complaining. Now I would say that there isn't options that we're passing, so we should probably go to libs db connect and let's look at some of these options. So it's saying buffer max entries are not supported, so delete that. Use find and modify is not supported. Use create index is not supported. So I don't know why those aren't supported, honestly. I'm not a Mongo expert or mongoose expert. Let's try it again. I'll click refresh and see what happens. It's still failing. Now, I think it's failing because, again, this whole caching mechanism we have set up, we might actually have to restart the server, like do a hard restart on our API so that it will reload not from cache. And here we go. User is not allowed to do action find on test rooms. So I think this is actually a MongoDB Atlas issue where you have to actually give it permission to do things on your database potentially. So let me go to my database and let's see if there's a way to like set this up a little bit. Okay, I think the issue here, if I first of all, I should probably delete this collection. I think there's some more setup we have to do with MongoDB Atlas where basically you have to create a database. Actually, we have a database right here. It's called my cluster. So I think what you typically need to do in your .env file is you need to put the name of your database at the end. I'll say like /my cluster here. And let me just do a hard restart on this. And let's see what happens if I were to refresh my page here. User is not allowed to do action find on my cluster.rooms. So now I think the database is set up correctly, but for some reason you're still not you're not allowed to access something. So let me go ahead and try doing something. Actually, I'm getting this all messed up. I think I actually have to create a new database here. I'm gonna try adding my own data, and the database could be called, what do I want the database to be called? I'll just say Omegle, and the collection could be called rooms. Let me create this and see what happens. Okay, so bear with me. This is a live coding, so there's going to be stuff that I do that's completely wrong, but we figure out along the way, right? It's good to watch other people struggle and learn and figure out problem solving along the way. But there has to be some type of connection issue with this user. So I'm going to go back to database access and I must be doing something wrong. Actually, it could also be network access. I'm going to say allow connection from anywhere. So that when we deploy this to Vercel, like we can also connect to this. And then also let's go back to database access and make sure, because we gave this user permission for everything. You see here it says all resources. So I don't know what the issue might be at this point. Let's just see. Okay, so this Stack Overflow is saying like, yeah, I need to modify this and say built-in roles. And I need to select Atlas admin, maybe. And I think that should give us access to do that now. Okay. So I apologize for that. I probably should have prepared a little bit before this video, but you know, that's what happens when you code. Like you have to go and debug stuff. So this is a permissions issue. I have to give this user actual like admin access so it can access the database. And I believe we also need to set up the network to allow access to this cluster. But now when I hit this API, we actually get back an empty array, which is exactly what we want. And if I were to further exemplify what I'm doing, because at this point you might be completely confused about what I'm even doing, I'm going to go and try to add in a room. I'm going to say insert document, and we're going to add in a status here. And the status is going to be called waiting. I'm going to click insert. And now if I go back and just refresh my API, we should get back that one entry that we added to our list of rooms. Cool. So I think we've successfully set up an API to connect to MongoDB. We set up this mongoose connect thing. We set up a rooms endpoint that allows you to get back all the rooms in the system. I would definitely recommend just doing a commit. I'm going to say connect next to Mongo Atlas. go ahead and add all the changes except for the .env. Make sure you never commit your .env file. That would be a big mistake because you could expose secrets. So here I'm gonna go ahead and just do a .env file. And now I should not see that pop up in my git commit. I'm gonna go ahead and add everything, do a commit and sync that up so that now anyone who were to look at my repo can get those changes. Okay, so we made a little bit of progress, but what do we really want to do when the user loads the UI? We want to get back a random user or room that's in a status of waiting. So I'm actually going to try something a little bit interesting. I'm going to go ahead and just say in here, we can do like a query. I think we could say where, and then I think we could say like status. I'm going to say status is waiting. Now I might have to go and look up the docs. In fact, let me also try using ChatGPT real quick. I want to kind of try this out, like to see how useful this would be. I'm going to say a mongoose query, which finds all rooms of status waiting. Let's see what this gives us. I always want to play around with new tools to see, like, does it actually help me with what I'm doing? And it looks like I can just do db collection find. So let's actually try that. I'm going to say status waiting. Okay, so I didn't even have to go to the docs. Hopefully this works. If I refresh the page, do we get back the room? It seems like we do. If I were to change this to chatting, does this return nothing? And it does. Cool. So you could also, hopefully use GitHub Copilot would help you as well. Or you can go to the docs and read through the docs. There's many different ways to figure out what you're trying to do. But this will give us back all the rooms that are in a waiting status. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want people to just be able to query and get every single room that's in a waiting status. In fact, I think what we could also do is we can say, I'm going to change this query a little bit. And I know you guys might think this is cheating using AI to generate some of this code, but I'm going to go ahead and say, make the query randomly find one. Let's see what this thing can give us. Now it's going to give us an aggregate and a sample. I've never used this before. So I think, so let's try this out. I haven't used this aggregate thing before. I'm going to try using aggregate instead. So that should give us a random room that's in a status of waiting. But then it says you have to use cursor next to basically get that information. So I think what I could do is just do a .next here. And let's see if this thing still works the way we think it does. Aggregate next is not a function. I think if I do this, actually, I don't think I even need to use next. So let's see if this actually works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just add in another one. And I will say this is also going to have a status of waiting. Go ahead and insert that one. Now we have two things that are in status of waiting, but if I were to refresh the page, we still only get back one, and it randomly seems to switch between them. So pretty cool. I didn't know this method before, and now I do. I don't really work with MongoDB or Mongoose that often. I kind of just do it for these little tutorial videos because Mongoose and Mongo is pretty easy to get going. But that's how you can do it in the actual query itself, which I think would be really useful for the front end. So I think the API is good. Now what we want to do is we want to go to the UI, and we probably want to, like, when this page loads, we want to basically show a spinner, and then we want to fetch a random room that's in waiting, if there is one. And if there's not, then we probably want to create one. Okay, so we'll probably have to come back and add a post request endpoint for creating a new room. But let's just go ahead and see if we can do this. So when this page loads, again, I'm gonna use this client side. You can do this with a Git client side props if you want to. But for now, I'm just gonna do it client side. And what we're gonna do is when this page loads, we're gonna fetch from the API. So I'll say fetch, and then I'll say /API/rooms. And that should give us back promise. I'll say .then, and I'll say response JSON. And then I'm going to attach another then, and I'll say rooms. And I'm basically going to say if we get some rooms back. So if the length of the rooms is greater than 0, then we want to do something. Otherwise, we do something else. Let me save this. So if we do get results back, we want to basically connect to that room, and then the users can start chatting and talking to each other. If not, we want to basically create a new room. So let's verify this kind of works. I'm going to put a debugger statement right here, and I'm going to go ahead and go over to my code, go over to my UI, and load up my debugger and refresh the page. And when this page loads, it should hit this. Rooms come back. We get a room that has a status of waiting, which means we should probably go into that if statement right here. Okay, the other approach is we should probably create the room. So let's focus on creating the room, and we can achieve that by switching this to a case of post. I'll do a break, and we're basically need to insert something into Mongo using this mongoose driver. So I'm going to say await room.create status of waiting, and then I'll say const room is equal to this res.status of 200.json of room. So this will basically create a new room if for whatever reason we don't get any rooms back that are in a status of waiting. So then I'm gonna go ahead and just try to invoke that method from here. I'll say fetch API rooms method post. Don't know if you need this at headers. We could try doing that in a little bit, but basically this should return a response.json. And then we're going to say then we basically can get the room ID. So the room should come back. And for right now, I'm just going to console log the room like this. And we could abstract these away into helper functions if you want to. Just for right now, I'll say const create room like that. And I'll paste all that code in. And then this will just basically return the room. And that kind of abstracts away a little bit of the logic, makes it a little bit cleaner to understand. But what's it saying? Does not exist on. Oh, I need to return. Make sure you return there. It's complaining because room has a type of explicit any. So it's complaining that it doesn't know what like this thing returns. Okay, so one thing I could do is I could say type room is equal to status of string, and then we can use that type. Basically what I could do is I could define it here like that. So this function returns a promise that has a room in it. So now down here, this thing, at least I thought it would be, it should, oh, I need to call it. I need to call it. There. So when you call it, you know that this thing's a room. This room has a status on it. Very good. So again, if you try to connect to the application and no one else in the app is waiting, then what happens is it creates a new room so that other people can connect to you. And we probably want to keep track of that. So when you create a new room, we probably want to store that room ID somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and say like const room and set room equals use state. Can't type right now, use state. And I'll set it to nothing for right now. Just let it be undefined. But we're going to basically say set room of room here, which we could do this. And I think we want to put a room or undefined here. There. So we finished one of the to-dos. Now the other to-do we want to do is basically, if we get back some rooms, we probably just want to say set room of rooms of 0. There we go. Now maybe it makes sense to have the API just return one room, but I think this logic should be good. And we could probably just display the room underscore ID. I do believe these things have like an ID on them, like this. Technically, this is a leaky abstraction. Like we shouldn't know that we're using mongoose behind the scenes. I always forget if it's a capital S when you're doing TypeScript types or lowercase s. I guess it doesn't really matter, but I'm sure there is a difference between them. Let's just do that. Parsing error, unexpected token. Did you mean this? I have an extra curly brace at the end. Let me delete that. So basically, let's refresh the page, and it should display a room ID if one exists. So what we're going to be using that room ID for is like we'll have to use that as a unique identifier so that two people can connect together using this Agora IO service. But now that we have a room ID, basically, if someone else were to load up the same page, it should connect them to this room. But we want to make sure that like we don't have multiple people all connecting to the same room. So we probably need to go back and we need to basically mark the room as joined when we return it. So let's go back to API rooms here. And I'm actually going to basically get the room that came back and I need to update. I'll say await room. In fact, I don't know if if this is going to be an array of mongoose rooms. Like we might be able to say rooms of 0 dot status is equal to chatting, and then rooms 0 dot update. I don't know if this will work. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'll say if there is a rooms dot link. So if something came back, then I'll try to update the status. I don't know if this will work. This might be a raw object and not like a mongoose object. Let's try it real quick. I'm gonna click refresh and then let's see what happens. The backend actually seems like it crashed. Maybe. Don't know why it crashed. Let's see, refresh the page, bad request. Maybe I need to await on it. Yeah, I'm gonna assume that this is not an actual like mongoose object when you use aggregate. This is probably just some like raw JSON. So I think what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to say like room ID is equal to rooms of 0 underscore ID. And then we're gonna have to basically say room dot update. I'll say update. If I want an update, let's do this. Oh, wait, is that deprecated? What does the first argument of this method need? It needs a filter. I think there's a find by ID in update. Let's do that. I'm going to say room ID. And then we want to update the status to be chatting. Okay, so this probably a better approach. So if you actually get a room back and you return it, let's just automatically set the room as chatting, and both users should be like, they have the information to connect to each other. So now what we could do is go to Mongo Atlas and let's verify if I were to refresh this page somehow. Where's the refresh button? Here it is. One of them should have a status of chatting. Here it is. Okay. And then if I were to delete both of these and refresh this page, it should create a brand new room. Has a status of waiting. I think it also like forced this one to recreate. And if I refresh the page, we should hopefully make one of those as be chatting. Okay, so the issue we're seeing right now is due to React's strict mode, which does 2 use effect calls when the page loads. So it's actually creating 2 rooms. You know what? I'm gonna actually turn off strict mode. Like, I don't want to waste my time with this, to be honest. Strict mode is such a pain to like do correctly. And it's good to have around, but honestly, like, I don't want to waste time in a YouTube video making sure everything's perfect for strict mode. When it's such a small edge case, like how often is someone going to go to your page or refresh and go back? Like, it's an edge case that we have to handle, but I just don't want to handle it right now. Sorry. So let's try this again. I'm going to go to the UI. I'm going to refresh the collection, and then I'm going to delete all of these things, because right now it's just making a bunch of extra rooms that it really shouldn't. The UI really shouldn't. And obviously there's edge cases. Like, what if someone creates 100 rooms and like they're all in the status of waiting, but no one's actually there? You don't want people to connect to random rooms that they're like, no one's there. Those edge cases you have to kind of worry about. This should have created a new room, should be in the status of waiting. Why is it still? I think I have to restart my server to turn off strict mode. Encoding's so fun. Okay, this one should be it. Like, this should be the last time. All right, refresh the page. And now I have 23. Here we go. And it's in a status of chatting for some reason. I don't know why it's in a status of chatting, because it should not have connected to that. I think it's because I refreshed it. All right, let's stop and think about this. So when someone first loads up their browser, it needs to create a room if there's not already one that exists. Okay, we have that logic here. If there is a room that exists, connect them to it. Now, I think the issue we just saw, I just refreshed the page when I shouldn't have. So let's just try this again. Clear out the database. Click refresh once. That should create a new room. There should be a status of waiting so that other people can connect to it. There. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pick a new tab. Click enter. That should connect us to that same room since there's only one other room in waiting status. And now they're in chatting. So we're going to go with this, and like we'll have to think about edge cases and fixes later on, but let's just kind of go down this path. It's going to be probably error prone, but it's good for right now. Okay, so what we want to do is like, let's first allow these two people to talk to each other. How do we do that? Well, we need to basically bring in the Agora RTM library and also create an Agora RTM service so that we can like chat with other users in the room. So first of all, let's just go to Agora here. I'm gonna go to project management. After you kind of set up an account and register, you have the ability to create new projects. And I will say Omegle or Omegle, whatever it's called, clone. And I will just make this chatting, social chat room. How about that? And we're gonna do testing mode for right now. Go ahead and click submit. And that should create us a new project. And if we were to go into the config here, the thing we really want to care about is this app ID. So we're going to copy this app ID and we're going to be using that in our next application. Let's go back to the .env. I'm going to say Agora app ID is equal to this. And I think this also needs to be public. So I think you have to do like next public Agora app ID is equal to that. Next public env variables. I have to Google this. I forgot how to do it. I think it's just like next public. Yeah, next public. So if you want an environment variable to show up in the UI, you have to prefix it with next public like we did here. And I think technically the backend API should be able to access your next public. So we might just need to do like just one of these. Let's just try one of them for right now and see if we can get it going. So this is the app ID you use to connect to Agora services, and you can create new chat rooms that have people like talk to each other with real live messaging. Okay, so I have another project where I kind of did this in React, and we're going to go ahead and look at the package.json because there's a library you can pull in called the Agora RTM SDK. I'm going to go ahead and just install that down here. npm install the Agora RTM SDK. And now that that's installed, what we're going to do is we're going to go and look at some example code that I did in the past because my memory isn't the best. And it's good to have references that you've done that you can kind of follow. Let's open up this app.jsx and read through how some of this stuff works. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to pull in this RTM library here. I'll just go ahead and do this, bring in the RTM client. And we're going to be using this client to basically connect with that app ID to the Agora services. So kind of just go down some of this code. And let's kind of remind ourselves how you do this. Okay, so basically when we get that room ID, we're going to use that to connect to an Agora room. Okay, so let's just go ahead and look through this code a little bit. Basically, what we need to do is client. Okay, here we're going to import the Agora RTM library inside the effect because the way Next works is sometimes you can't import code that tries to access window or global. I do believe the Agora RTM SDK tries to access global. So when Next tries to statically generate this page, it's going to fail because it doesn't know like where this library is getting some stuff from. So in the effect, that's where we actually need to import the SDK. And in fact, I'm going to abstract this away into a function. Like we can say connect to Agora here. We'll make this a function. In fact, we'll make it an async function so we can use the await keyword. And I'm going to pull on that import there. So now we're going to dynamically import this library on the fly, only when we need it. And let's kind of look through what's going on here. So first thing we need to do is we need to connect to that, create an instance to Agora using that public Agora ID. Now I think I called it something else. I call it Agora app ID. So let's just go ahead and put it there. So this client is an object that you can use to kind of send messages and do other stuff. So we need the first call .login here. And we're going to log in using, I believe you can just use a random user ID. And token, I don't think we even need as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave off token, because I think it is optional. You can pass undefined. And if you look over for UID, you have to provide a string length less than 64 bytes with the following character scope. So we'd have to basically, I think what we could basically do is we could set up a user ID here. Like when this app loads, I'll just say const user ID. And we could just go ahead and say like useState is equal to, what do we want the user ID to be? We could just default to some like random characters. So I'll say like math.random times 1e to the 6. And then I'm going to kind of cast that to a string here. And then I think that should allow us to just basically pass in a user ID. Like so. And then we're going to go ahead and, what else do we need to do? There's also stuff for logging out and stuff. We'll have to probably handle that in the cleanup function. But for right now, let's just try to focus on this. And then what we could do is when we've set up the client and we've logged in, we can actually start sending messages and receiving messages. So let's just go ahead and find where we start sending messages. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to actually connect to the same room. So I believe what we could do is use the room ID. Hopefully this will work fine. It's saying room is possibly undefined, which I think we should say, let's put room ID here so that it won't ever be possibly undefined. And we're going to pass that in when we call this function. So this channel object is what you can do to send messages and stuff. And you can basically just tell our code to join the channel like that. And we can also start listening to messages as well. So let's just go ahead and pull out this code. And I'm going to say channel on channel message. We're going to basically get back a message here. So I can just go ahead and print out the message right now in the peer ID, make sure that this is all working fine. And that should all hopefully work. So we're going to call this function to see what happens when we have successfully set the room here. So like after both of these, we could do like a finally maybe, assuming that there's no errors. Or we could just go ahead and just like call this. You know, I'm going to go ahead and just refactor this just a little bit because I want access to the room. So I'm going to go ahead and say like set room is going to be room and then connect to room underscore ID. That. Does that make sense? And then we're going to do the exact same thing here. So here we could have like const, I could say connect to Agora, and I could say rooms of 0. I might come back and refactor this code a little bit. It's kind of messy. There might be some, you know, and I do think there's some room for improvement, but let's just not focus too much on all that. Now, here it's saying that there's a dependency of user ID, which, where is user ID being used there? I don't see where that's being used. Oh, it's being used here. So this thing, in fact, I don't think this even needs to be in the use effect. I don't think. I think we can extract this away and put it as like a top level function here, because user ID could potentially be passed in as a string. And we're going to go ahead and just say like user ID like that, and user ID like that. And now that I think about it, like most of the stuff we might not even have to use in a use effect. Like we can make this a more like, there's a button on the page. So I'll just go ahead and say like button join room. I'll say start chatting. And then when basically when you click on that button, handle start chatting clicked. How about that? So if you can avoid using the asynchronous or the use effect, like I would probably try to do it, just because a lot of this stuff you don't even need to like have an effect. Like when the page mounts, like if the user experience is better when you actually click a button and it does this stuff, you can kind of move all this stuff as well. Some more functionality cleanup I'm going to do is, let's keep this consistent. I'm going to make this function create room like this. Okay. And then also function get random room is going to return a promise of a room. That, and that's going to call this stuff. I'll just go ahead and return that to call. And that should hopefully return a random room. And I think the way this was written, this has to be an array of rooms. It's kind of weird, I might change that. But so now basically, when you click on the join button, which if you look at the UI, we should have a join button when this page first loads now, which I think I stopped the application. So let's just go ahead and run dev like so that the app can start running. And then we should see a button. Okay, and when you click on that button, you should see a bunch of console logs related to Agora that print out, because what it's going to do is going to create a room like we have here, creates a room, sets the room, and then it starts connecting to that room using the user ID that was some random state user ID. And then it should also start listening for messages on the channel once it uses the room ID to connect. So it's a lot of stuff going on. Let's just see what happens. It might crash. Click it. And what happens is you see it connecting to Agora. The SDK initializes. We connect to the room ID. And then we should start getting any type of messages that come back. That's pretty cool. So what we also need to do is when we get messages, so like for this channel on channel message, we have to basically append messages as they come into some type of data structure. Okay, so we should probably inside of here, I could say const messages and set messages. And I could just say this is a use state. And this is going to have, this is going to be an array. So let's just go ahead and add a type here. I'll say type message. I'll call it T message to be more consistent. And then we're going to say this is going to have a user ID, which is a string, and then probably a message, which will be a string as well. Save that. And this will be an array of T message like so. So what we need to do is whenever messages come in, we need to append those. So I'm going to say current messages, and we're going to return a new array with current messages appended with a new message. So in this case, we'll have a user ID is peer ID, and then the message like that. In fact, I could just call this user ID and we can keep this a little bit cleaner. Now, the only issue is that we don't know what set messages is. So we'll have to pass that in. I'm going to go ahead and pass in a set messages function. I'll just call it any for right now. But basically, when we call connect to Agora, we've abstracted away like what it does when messages happen. So I'm actually going to pass in set messages here. So set messages, pass that in so that the underlying abstraction can know how to like what to do with the messages as they come in. And here we go. So hopefully this has an implicit any type. And I think what I need to do is we need to change this to a function that basically has a T message array for the current state. And it's going to basically return a T message for the new state. Does that make sense? Parsing error. What did I forget here? Is that how you do it? I think I'm doing this backwards. Is that how you do it? So for some reason, this is saying that current message has implicit any, which is strange because like this thing, oh, this thing needs to take in a callback. Is that how we do it? I don't even know at this point. T message or user is not assignable to T message. I'm going to move this type up so it's with my other type. So T message has a user ID and a message. And this thing, the callback, this set messages is a function that when you call it, or this set messages is a function that accepts a callback. And the callback accepts a function which is basically going to return an array of new T messages. You know, I might change this a little bit. I'm just going to change this to on message. And this is going to take in a callback of T message. That's it. It's going to be on message is a function that takes in a T message like this. Hopefully this is easier. Parsing error arrow. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to move this logic away like this. Message text. Oh, maybe that's why it's complaining. Key message can be undefined. So right now I'm just kind of fixing a bunch of TypeScript errors. It's the beauty and pain of using TypeScript. Why is this complaining now? On message is a function that should do nothing. Let's do that. So the idea was that, like, basically when we get a message, we want to call, I'll just say like cur. I'm not really explaining my approaches that well right now, and I apologize for that. I just wanted to get this working. But I don't want this thing to know about React state or anything. I just want to like call a callback function. So I'm kind of like restructuring how a lot of the data is set up. And fixing some syntax errors. Okay. Whew. Okay, so all of that was basically just so that I can like show some messages. So when we click start chatting, we probably want to like show the messages here. So I could have like an unordered list, and I could have like a map of messages.map message. And we're going to basically render out a list item for every single message like this. We could also do like the user ID like that, followed by the message. And this probably needs a key, which in this case, I'm just going to keep it the index because like we don't have a unique identifier for every message right now. But let's see what happens if we actually load up 2 pages. And I might need to clear out my database first so that we don't like connect to some non-existing room. So I'll delete this one. And I'll delete this one. And let's go back. I'm going to go ahead and click start chatting. That should create a room and connect to it. Now over here, we should be able to do the same thing. That should connect to the same room and start listening to messages. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to write a message. I forgot to write the ability to write messages. So we're going to have to go back to our UI here. We're going to have to add an input and probably a button that says submit. And this input needs to basically bind to some state. I'll say on change, and then we could say we could say set input e.target.value. And basically, we want to keep track of the input here. So say const input set input equals use state. This is going to be an empty string to start off with. And we're going to go ahead and also say value is equal to input here. So now the user can type into an input box and click submit, and what it's supposed to do is send a message. So we're going to have to make a new function called handle submit message. A function that is going to take in, well, I guess it doesn't need to take in anything, but definitely when you click on this thing, we want to call handle submit message. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically try to send out a message to Agora. Now, unfortunately, we don't have access to the channel. I think to send a message, you have to say channel.sendMessage. But channel was basically created in this connect to Agora callback. So what we could do is connect to Agora could potentially return the channel here, since we might need to use it later on. And wherever we call connect to Agora, we could say channel is await this, like this. Now, is this an asynchronous function? It is. So let's just go ahead and call it there and call it there. And we're going to have to do some asynchronous stuff here. I might change this whole thing to an asynchronous function just so it's a little bit easier to like deal with. So I'm going to say get random rooms is equal to await of that. And then if the rooms are defined, otherwise we're going to go ahead and do that. So we'll set the rooms and then we're connect to Agora and we'll get the channel here. Other than that, I'm going to say create room is equal to await create room. Again, just switching this over to async await since it's a little bit cleaner. And we basically just need to set the channel so we can keep track of it. So we could keep this in a ref potentially. Don't know if that would be better. But since we don't ever need to like render the channel to the page, I might just do that. I'll say channel ref is equal to use ref. And we're going to go ahead and make sure we import that. And then I'm going to say channel ref dot current is equal to channel. Like that. And I'll do the same thing here. And we're going to just type this with any for right now, just because I didn't want to waste more time with TypeScript, to be honest with you all. But honestly, you could just hover over this as an RTM channel. So I guess I could say RTM channel. Was it all capitalized? RTM channel? I might have to import this from here so that the IntelliSense doesn't complain. Okay, so there's, I don't know, this code could be cleaned up a little bit. But basically, when you connect to the channel, we're going to keep track of that channel ref. And we need to basically use that when someone tries to handle a submit message. So here, I'm going to say channel ref.current.sendMessage. And we want to send off some text, which will be equal to input. And I believe this is asynchronous, so we should probably wait. This should probably be async. And then we probably need to say set input equal to an empty string when it's done sending. So if we have successfully hacked this thing together, what I could do is I'm going to go ahead and just hard refresh both those pages. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete any rooms that are stuck in chatting. Now I'm going to click start chatting. And then I'll click start chatting. And I'm going to type in hello and then click submit. And hopefully that did something. It did. It sent a message of hello. Click submit. This one gets what is up. Okay, so now we actually have two panels that are actually connected and talking to each other. It's really ugly. Obviously, this is like a prototype, but we got something working. Now, what I would recommend doing is we could probably style this chat panel a little bit and make it a little bit cleaner. Now, again, the user IDs are not, they shouldn't even need to be printed out. You know, what I noticed is that there's a period in the user ID. I don't think that's probably a good idea, especially since we're doing like math.random here. We probably should be parsing that as an int, so we don't have like decimals. Let's do that. Anyway, so also what you notice is that when this page first loads, like we shouldn't display an input box and a submit until you're actually chatting. So I think we should dynamically show some different stuff based on if we're connected. So I'm gonna say const is chatting is equal to room and just check if room is defined. If it's not defined, then we know we're not chatting. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just say, if we are chatting, then we're gonna display basically all of this. Okay. And if we're not chatting, we are going to display a button that says connect. There we go. Now let's try it again. So when you first load the page, click start chatting, shows the room ID, shows the room ID. I can click hello, click submit, and then that sends it. So one thing that you'll notice, again, for some reason, it still has a decimal here. We'll have to figure that out. I don't know why there's still a decimal. I thought I parsed it. Probably just need to do a hard refresh on my page. But where's that random stuff coming from? Math.random 1e to the 6. Oh, okay. Well, obviously that's not going to do anything. I'm going to parse int this like that, and then cast it to a string like that. Anyway, so one thing you'll notice is that when you send a message, you actually don't see your own message get printed out. Now, that's just because Agora is not going to send you back the same message you send. So wherever we send the message here, we actually need to kind of append our own message. So I'm going to say set messages. And then we're going to basically just take this. Okay. We're just going to take the same logic. And we're going to append a new message that's going to have a user ID, which is going to be our user ID. And the message is going to be input. Okay, so this is basically like when we send a message ourselves. Let me just hard refresh these pages. Start chatting, and click submit. Now it actually shows up in the page that we're on. So instead of it printing an ID here, I think it should say you or them. That might make a little bit more sense. So we could find out where we're outputting this user ID. And I'm just going to basically say, I'll make a function up here. Function, I'll call it convert to you, them. And that needs to take in a message, message like this. And basically it's going to return if the message user ID is equal to the current user ID, then we're going to print out you. Otherwise, we're going to print out them. And this is like a helper function we can use to wrap that information. Okay, so now it should pass in the message and it should work. Now it says them or you. Pretty cool. And now it's just a matter of like, okay, so there's small like bugs where like I can't click enter here. Well, that's because this thing should probably be wrapped in a form. So I should probably add a form here. And I should probably add an on submit. And that's going to say handle submit message. And instead of putting the on click here, that's actually going to do an E, and I'll say e.prevent default. And that's react.form event, I believe. And now I can actually type in and click enter, and that should hopefully send the message. Cool, so now we actually have two users who can actually chat with each other. That is pretty awesome. And just through connecting to an Agora channel and sending a message, that's basically all we had to do. So let's just go ahead and remove like the user ID or the room ID. Like we don't need to display that personally. And then this whole panel, like we could make this whole thing into a chat panel, I guess. Like so, make this a div. And the idea is like the chat panel should probably like be on the right side of the page. And on the left side of the page, we need to have some type of like, I don't know, video panel. And the video panel, like we could say this is going to have a you, and then it's going to have a div. Actually, let me not say you and me. I'll say class name of video. Video stream. How about that? Video stream. So we'll have two video streams that are displayed inside a video panel. Now this thing, I need to add fragment here so it doesn't complain anymore. And you know what? Maybe we should actually have the whole thing inside a chat window. What that? Okay, so I'm going to use just normal CSS for styling. I'm not going to use CSS modules. So I'm kind of mixing and matching CSS, but hopefully you guys will forgive me for it being so sloppy. So in the chat window, I'm going to go ahead and just try to get this left and right, where I could basically say display is flex. And I think by default, it's going to be like a row layout where chat window should be on the left and chat panel should be on the right. Let's just go ahead and on chat panel, I'll say chat panel. I'm going to give this a background of white and then probably give this a color of black, padding of 20 pixels and see what happens. I mean, doesn't look that great, but we're not going for styling, are we? I'm not a styler. I'm not a CSS expert. Well, I could figure this stuff out if I had a good reference image, but I don't have like a designer. But anyway, what happens if I keep doing this? So for the other thing, for the video stream, so in the chat window, the video stream, we're going to say width of like what, 200 pixels, height of 200 pixels, background white. Let's see what happens here. Looks pretty bad because we should probably give this some gap of 50 pixels. So there's some space between them. And then also for the video stream, we want to have this probably be display of flex. So I'll say display of flex. Flex direction is column, and then also say gap of 50 pixels, just so it kind of looks a little bit better. Now, it looks a little bit high. I might reduce the height so it's more like, you know, rectangle instead of square. And then for the chat panel itself, let's push this submit button to the very bottom. Now, I think the way we can do that, if we were to add a class to here, actually, I think on the chat panel itself, I could give this a display of flex, and then I could say justify content space between, and that should, I think, push them. Oops, I did not mean to refresh my page. I need to change the flex direction to column here, so let's do that. And now we'll push it to the very bottom. It looks much better. So at this point, we have successfully connected to the same RTM channel. We can send messages. But how do we actually connect webcams together? So we're going to go and look at another project that I worked on. This was like a speed date project, which has a lot of the same code that we're going to be looking at. But let's figure out where we start bringing in the RTM or RTC library. Okay. So there's another library that we can use called Agora RTC SDK NG. I'm going to go ahead and import that. So let's just go ahead and pull this up, import that. And going back to the code, when you connect to a room, remember we have like connect to handle start chatting clicked. Okay, so here what we also need to do is once we actually connect to a room and we get a channel, we kind of want to do the same approach where we need to connect or import this library. So right off the bat, I mean, like, where do we import that? The RTM stuff. Connect to Agora, we imported it here. So we could probably do the same approach for connecting to the video stuff. So I might rename this to connect to Agora RTM. And this one, I'll make another one called function connect to Agora RTC, right? One's for chat, like live chat, one's for messaging. And we're going to import that RTC library here. And we're going to follow a very similar approach. So I'll go ahead and copy the client. This is like the codec that's used for streaming your webcam, and this is just the mode. So we'll keep that as standard. And then we're going to do client join. Now we're going to need the user ID passed in as a string here. Token, I believe we can just set as undefined, maybe. And then for match ID, we're going to put room ID. So I think we also need a room ID here. And I'll make the ordering consistent with this function. So we have room ID, then we have user ID. And then for the app ID, again, this was like hard-coded, or this was in the environment variable. So let's just go ahead and paste that in like this. I'll make that null. I guess token has to be null. So that should connect to the channel. So I think we might need to actually generate a token for this to kind of work. We'll figure this out in just a second, but basically, let's go ahead and we'll connect to it, and then we need to keep track of some stuff. So basically, first thing we want to do is we want to listen for when someone tries to publish their webcam media, right? So we're going to say client on user published, and then we're going to subscribe to the client. And basically, when we get a type of video, let's just worry about video right now. We're going to go ahead and just set them video. How about that? And we actually might need to pass it in as a callback. So I'm gonna go ahead and say like on video connect. And that could be, I'll just do any for right now, but we're basically gonna pass in that, the other user that was connected. In fact, I'll call it them user, make it more consistent with how the chat was going. And then we need to also do some stuff with publishing our own webcam and audio. So I'm gonna go ahead and just call this method. Create microphone and camera tracks. That's basically going to prompt your laptop to allow access to your microphone and camera. And then the video track is track 1. So we can keep track of this with another callback function. Again, I'm going to try to keep this function void of any React code. I'm going to say on webcam start. I don't know. And that one is going to call here. Okay, so that's going to basically prompt you to have access to webcam and audio. If you click yes, it's going to call this function, and then it's going to publish both my audio and my webcam for other clients to listen to, and they can keep track of these. So for this thing to work, I think what we need to do is call this probably down here where we call connect to Agora RTM. So I'm going to go await on this, and we need to pass in the room.id, user ID, and then probably some callbacks. So this one was called like set them camera. So I'm going to make a function up here to keep track of that. I'll say set them video, equals use state. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and just, when we get that callback, I'm going to go ahead and call set them video with them video. Kind of a weird name for a variable, but I think it kind of works. Now, I think there's going to be a little bit of, I need to also keep track of the other argument, which was, I think, my video. So this one, I'm just going to set my video like this. Hopefully that's simple enough. And I'm just going to basically copy and paste this one, my video, and set my video. Okay. And now this is saying it has an implicit type of any. I'm gonna keep any for right now. I don't want to take the time to go look at the actual types, but I think if I just were to hover over where we are basically doing this tracks, there's an iMicrophone audio track and iCamera video track. So I think we want to just say that this is an iVideo camera or iCamera video track. And I don't know if this will totally work. I think this needs to be like an iRemote video track. And my video can be an iCamera video track. Now let's go up here. This thing is complaining because all I need to say iRemote video track like this. Okay. So hopefully this is good. Now what we want to do, what do we want to do? When we connect, we're doing all this stuff. Probably need to do the exact same logic, but do it up here. And this would be rooms of 0 ID. Okay. And yeah, I think this should hopefully work. I'm not too sure yet. I think we need a way to display them to the page, right? So in order to display these things, I do have like a little component I believe you can use called video player, where on the screen itself, like where we have video stream, we can add in video player, which can take in my video, and this one could be them video. Now let's go and find the video player component that I made in another video. where I don't really know where that is. Let's see. Public. No, let's go to source. Source. Page. I guess it would be in here. Oh, here it is. Video player. Let's just go ahead and copy this. I think it's a pretty small little function. And I'll just paste it in this file to begin with. This file is getting huge. It's almost like 220 lines of code. I would probably refactor this to be smaller. But it's good to start with everything in one file and then abstract and pull away later on as you like learn more about your business needs and your code's needs. But basically this thing is a little helper component that basically takes in the video track and it's going to play the video and stop the video based on when the component mounts and unmounts, and allows you to specify a little bit of styling if you want to. Now this thing has to have something defined. So like I'm gonna go ahead and just like fall back. I'm gonna make sure that like my video has to be defined before it'll render. Just like this. And let's just try this stuff out. I don't know if this will totally work. I'm gonna refresh the page. Oh, I need to run my app. I'll run dev. That. And let's give this a shot. I don't know if this is going to truly work because we might actually have to create a token server for this to work. But I'll click start chatting. And it should prompt me for my video. There we go. It didn't even prompt me because I gave it access before. And over here, if I click start chatting, I think it should put that video down at the bottom. Let's actually inspect this. So this could be a styling issue. I don't know if maybe there's something I'm missing here, but it should have played 2 video streams. This one is empty. Let's try to figure out why this one is empty. Basically, we should be getting this. So I'm going to say console log a them user connected video. How about that? So we should see this print out in our application. I'll go ahead and stop both of these pages. Click start chatting. And then over here, I'm going to click start chatting. And I'm going to search for them. Or what is the message? A them user connected video. Let's see why this is not printing out. All right, so let's see if there's errors. There might be some errors going on. Warning, you input a string as a user ID, ensure better end-to-end experience. Agora highly suggests not using a string as a user ID. Okay, so that could be one thing that we have to fix. All right, so this video stream down here, like it literally is not getting set up because for some reason this thing is not getting called. Client, join client, create client. So I'm going to try just because I think I have a hunch that the token has to be defined. Like I think after naming the primary certificate, user can join channel by token generated by primary certificate. Like I think we might have to turn this on. Let me go ahead and turn on the primary certificate. And that'll give us a little token we can use. So I'm going to go ahead and hard code that token in right here and see what happens. This is like a token that lives 24 hours. And you have to regenerate it next time. But I think we might be running into some type of security issues where I'll find app ID. Oh, actually, no, I think I have to go down to temp token. Temp token for audio. Please enable primary certificate first and delete no certificate. I'm also going to delete temp certificate because I think you need to do that to basically generate an RTC token. App certificate channel name. So I think for the channel name, we're going to have actually, unfortunately, right now, we're going to have to put in whatever channel name that exists here. But on the live system, like let me go back and output the room ID, which I think was somewhere here. Let's see. Let me just print out the room ID. So let's try this out real quick. Actually, in fact, I'm going to move this up and just wrap this in a fragment. Like so. So click start chatting. They got the room ID here. So actually, I think in order for this to work, I think Agora has it set up that you have to use a token. So we're going to have to figure out, I don't remember how to do this. I think if I go to, I'm going to bring in another package. So I'm going to say npm install Agora access token. And what this is going to do is it allows us to generate a token, RTC token builder. So we're going to have to use some of this code to basically return a token. Otherwise, you can't, I don't think, have two users connecting to the same chat room due to how security works with Agora. And that's a good thing because you don't want anyone just connecting and seeing video, right? You want to require an actual secure token. But what I'm going to do is when we set up the room and when you connect to the room, which I believe would be this one. So when you connect to the room, or I guess also when you create a new room and you're waiting, we want to generate a token. So I'm going to make a function called like get token. And I'm going to go ahead and paste in all that code. And we're going to have to keep track of an app cert now, right? So what I'm going to do is go back here. Actually, go back here and we should have an app certificate here. Let's copy that primary certificate. Go to .env and I'm going to say Agora app cert like that. And we're going to use that. Make sure I start my application. I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. And this was, I think, called next public Agora app ID. So we have to use the app ID and the app certificate and also the room ID. So I'll say room ID as the channel name, and the account could be the user ID. User ID is a string. RTC role, I'll make sure I just auto import that, which I believe comes from, go ahead and just auto import that. Expiration, so expired after like 36, what was that, 5 minutes maybe, or 30 minutes? I don't know. But this will generate a token and return it back. So I think we can use this function called get token. And we're going to basically return a token here. Instead of just returning the room, we're going to return both a token and a room. So rooms, and then I'll say token is get token like this. And this needs to be, this would have to be the user ID who's doing, the user ID who's doing the request. So I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pass in a user ID from the front end, and we can kind of send that back. And for response data, for right now, I'm literally just going to put this as any, because now we're changing a lot of stuff. But for the token to work, we have to pass in a room ID and a user ID. The room ID we know, it's right here. In fact, if there's no rooms, we should probably throw an error. So I'm going to go ahead and say like else the res.status of 400 JSON, there are no open rooms. Or in fact, I'll just return an empty right here. How about that? So if there are rooms, then I'm going to go ahead and get the first room. And then using the room ID, I'm going to go ahead and I need to get the user ID too. The user ID would have to be passed in from the request, which would come here, which I'm guessing that comes from the query. So const user ID is equal to query. And this isn't the most secure approach of what I'm doing, but we're going to make this work for right now. I'll just do this. I don't know why it's complaining about it being an array. Don't need to put an exclamation mark there anymore. So when you connect to a room, it'll send you back a token. Also, when you create a room, we probably need to do a very similar approach where you send back the room, but then also you need to send back a token for that room. Because you don't want anyone just connecting to that room and doing some bad stuff, right? So we're going to do this and user ID again. Oh, I'll just do this. There we go. So hopefully this works. We'll have to test it out and see what happens. I do believe I need to restart my server if I haven't already because I updated the environment variables. And I'm going to go ahead and just go back to the UI here. And the changes that we have to make is basically when we do the fetch request to get the rooms, we also need to pass in the user ID. So I'm going to go ahead and say user ID is a string, and we're going to pass it in like this. And then also we're going to do the same thing here. And I need to rethink, like, this probably isn't secure because anyone can just make up a user ID and start connecting to other rooms and stuff, but let's just see what happens. So these two things would basically change the interface. So I need to make sure I pass in user ID here and also here when you create a room, pass in the user ID. And then when we try to connect, I believe we had a token that was like hard coded. Here, this needs to be an actual token. Now, where does token come from? Well, that would have to be passed in more than likely, right? So this would have to be a token, which is a string. And that token would definitely need to come from something. This would have to come from, let's see, handle start. This token probably needs to come from when we do this. This is going to return a rooms and then also a token. Okay, and then I think we also do it here. So this returns room and then a token. So we would have to pass in token down there to make that work. And then create room. This probably, this needs to be like a create room response, and that's going to take in a room and a token as a string. Now I'm just kind of just filling out my TypeScript stuff, make sure everything's good. And then this will be type t get random room response. That's a token. And that's a rooms array. Kind of hacky. I need to change that, but you know, it is what it is. All right, so no errors that I can see related to TypeScript in that refactoring. So if we were to go back and click on start chatting, let's see what happens. The vendor enabled the dynamic key but used the static key. What does that mean? I don't know if I did a hard, let me try again. I don't know if I refreshed properly. Rooms.length, get random room. So why, let's look at the network request. That should have returned, that returned an array. Okay, this is an issue. Let's go to the API and go to rooms. This one should not return this. It should return rooms, and then token should be null. That. Okay, so let's refresh the page. I'm going to click on start chatting, and let's figure out what this error is, because I don't think I've seen this one before. Usually means you have enabled security token, but didn't take it while login RTM. Okay, so I think this is related to the RTM stuff, because like now we might need a token for RTM to work as well. So we have to kind of rethink maybe what we're doing here. Let's see, connect to Agora RTM. This probably also needs to take in a token, like so. And then we're going to go ahead and make sure this thing has the definitions for that token. And I think here, when you log in, I think we need to pass in token. So let's see, refresh the page. Go ahead and click start chatting. Signature verification failed. You know what? I think I ran into this issue before, and the issue is there's two different ways to generate these tokens. You have to do them differently, one for Agora and one for the RTM. Agora online chat room. Let's go here, and I want to look at something real quick because I believe I generate tokens here on the server. Let's see, room router. Let's see if this has any type of token logic. Nope. Server router. RTM token builder. Yeah, so there's actually two different rooms. This is actually kind of painful. So I'm gonna have to actually make two functions. I'm gonna say function get RTM token, room ID, user ID, string, and I'm gonna go ahead and also import the RTM builder. So there's two different approaches and two different types of tokens you need to build, I believe, to get this to work. And we're gonna go ahead and use them both. So this one takes in again an Agora certificate and then an Agora ID. And this is going to take in a user ID. And I don't think it even needs a room ID for some reason. So let's just go ahead and do that. Now this one, the get token, I'm going to say I'm going to rename this the get RTC token. Okay. And then I'll rename this to get RTC token, and then RTM token will be this, get RTM token. And I just want to make sure that we give back the tokens when we either create or join a room. Okay. Now let's go back to the UI, and then the fetch requests that we do, those things need to change an RTC token and an RTM token. Okay. Same with this. And that's going to break our interfaces a little bit. So RTC token, RTM token. We're going to keep track of those. This one, when we connect to RTM, we need to pass in the RTM token. And then when we connect to RTC, we need the RTC token. Same approach for the other function. And let's just go ahead and paste that in. RTM token, RTC token. Let's see if that fixes our issue. Refresh the page. Start chatting. I don't see any errors pop up. Okay, it just popped up. Invalid token authorized failed. Now this is for RTC. So let's see if this is actually working. If I were to connect. So at this point, I need to kind of debug like what's going on. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get rid of the RTC stuff right now. I'm going to comment it out so I can kind of hone in like what is the actual issue? Is it the RTC connection or is it the messaging chat? So let's just make sure that like if I were to try to connect to the same room, which I think these, okay, it connected me to different rooms for some reason. Let's see if I can get to the same room. There we go. If I do test here, test comes up over here. So RTM is working fine. The issue is with RTC. For some reason, the webcam stuff is not working with either the token I'm passing in or something else. So let's just go ahead and add those things back in. And let's look. Handle start chatting click. So when you click on the button, it's sending in RTC token to connect to the RTC service. Now let's make sure I don't have the order of stuff wrong. So this takes in an app ID, takes in a channel name, takes in a token, and then it takes in a user ID. Now I think technically, I wonder if I didn't pass in a user ID. Like, let's see what happens here. Get RTC token. I want to make sure that like we're actually passing in a username here. So I'm going to print out the account like so. And then also I want to look at the network request because we should be sending it over in a query string. That when we actually connect to that endpoint, we are passing user ID. And we get back 77744. So the token is being set. Now, it could be a string, and maybe that's part of the issue. Like, I think maybe this needs to be a number. I'm going to try to make this a little bit smaller of a number. I think they might have like a hard limit of how big that UID can be. So doing a little bit of debugging, I'm seeing that for channel name, I'm actually printing out this like object, which might not be proper. I think what we need to pass to get our TC token, like room ID, I need to cast this to a string. So how do I do that? Mongoose ID cast to string. Looks like you just do toString. So let me try that. Maybe that's the issue. I hope it is. I think I'm still passing it wrong for some reason. Set the user ID. Okay, yeah, okay. So that was the issue. I was passing an object to a function that required a string. So a little dumb mistake. Make sure you do .toString in the ID, or else everything will just break. But that was just me not properly sending the right stuff to the Agora SDK. So double check your stuff. What did I put any other like helpful? Okay, let me delete some console logs I added everywhere. Let me delete this stuff. So let's see if I were to try to join that same room. I think it's 6E8. Let's see if we can connect and have that webcam. That's not the right room. Let me go back to a different one. Okay, so there's still an object ID printing out somewhere. I have to figure out where that is. It's probably also... Oh, it's probably down here. Okay, I'm stupid. Let me delete that too. And I'm going to go ahead and just figure out as a way to clear out this collection. I'm going to delete the collection. I'm just going to drop rooms. Go ahead and delete the whole thing, and then it should recreate, hopefully, when I refresh the page. So start chatting. Okay, so 6FF is the chat room name. 6FF. It's not a function. So I made some progress. I mean, it's crashing on something else, but hopefully like that's not related to anything else. Let's see, video track play is not a function. And that was when I tried to have someone else connect, I believe. So we have to go to the code where we are basically connecting. What's it called? User publish, this one. So on video connect. I think I'm probably putting the wrong thing here. Let me just put a console log and figure out what is the data structure of the user. I think I need to pass in .video track here. This is 704. Let's see if we can connect to that. 704. There we go. I got Omegle working. This clone finally works. Now there's some styling issues. I think I need to I think the styling here, if we get rid of this, like what happens? I would hope that it would actually put it full screen. Let me try doing like a width of 100% and a height of 100%. Don't know if that's what I need. There we go. All right, so maybe a label above or below both of these saying you or them would be useful. So like you, them. But honestly, like you can see your picture. I don't know how, that's probably not important. So there we have it. I think this is good. Now, obviously we need an audio track so that we can actually hear the other person talking. Now doing that with Agora is actually pretty easy as well. So like there's another if media type is equal to audio, I believe. What we can actually do is just start playing their, I could say on audio connect. I'm going to keep track of their audio as well, and we're going to go ahead and just pass another function here. So this would be like, actually, where did I put that one? On audio connect. Okay. So this would need another callback. So like them audio, and this would be iRemote audio. Actually, I don't know what this thing is. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna hover over this. What is audio track? It's an iRemote audio track. So let's make sure we import that from, I guess this would be from the RTC. And then we want to make sure that wherever we call this, the function that sets them audio, just like that. So we can just keep track of it. And then we can kind of pause it or mute it and do stuff later on if we want to. Const them audio set them audio equals use state I audio this that. Okay, so basically we can just play it, I believe. Remote audio track, iRemote audio track void. I think this thing is requiring it to be void. I'm just going to do any, whatever. Keep this simple. I think when the audio connects, we can actually say them user.audiotrack.play. And I think that'll start playing their audio. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. I think I probably, I have some more issues here. So let's copy this line and let's paste it here and save it. Let's just refresh the page and make sure we can connect to the same chat room. So this is 709. That's the wrong one. This is going to be another issue. Like, we're going to have chat rooms that are just like empty. So we'll have to figure out like how to circumvent that, honestly. So let's just go ahead and delete the collection again. This is like the fastest way I think it is to delete all the rooms. Just delete the collection, and then I'm going to go ahead and just click start chatting. That should make a new room. 71B at the end. 71B. And there. I don't know if you can hear it. So I have my audio playing from the other person. And it's as simple as that. But I'm actually going to turn that off right now because it's kind of annoying to hear. So wherever I do .play, I'm going to go ahead and just turn that off. So I think another cool thing would be is like a next button where you can click next and it just connects you to someone new, because that might be kind of useful. That's how Omegle works. So let's go ahead and try to add a next button. I think I might just add it at the top of the page, like where this is. Like, I'll just add a button that says next. And we're just going to basically say on click, handle next click. Okay, so handle next click. Let's just go ahead and make a function that's inside of home called function handle next click. And we basically want to run probably a lot of the existing code we already have and just rerun it. So handle start chatting clicked. What is this going to do? It's probably, it's a random room and it reconnects them. So I think we literally just need to rerun this function. So I'm probably going to just say call handle start chatting clicked. I think it might be more proper to rename this one. And I could say function handle start chatting clicked could call a function called initial or setup connect to a room. How about that? So then what we're going to do is this thing is going to be called connect to a room. And then both of them can just call connect to a room. I don't know if this is going to work exactly how I think it is, but let's try it out. I mean, so we're going to make 3 chat rooms now. We're going to connect, we're going to connect, and we're going to connect. Some of these people will connect to the same room, I hope. So these 2 are connected to the same room. But if I were to click next on this one, it should go try to find a random room that's in waiting and connect to them. The only one that's open is 720 at the end. Okay, so I guess 6.3a. Let's just go ahead and click next. And it connected the 6.3a. So now these two are connected. Or they should be. I don't know why this video is not popping up. I have to look into that. Okay, so the issue is when you click next, like we're not like disconnecting anything and we're not like cleaning anything up. So I think we need to like basically call a function to kind of clean everything up. Where do we do that? By the way, there's some code here that's like not even used. I can delete this. Okay, connect to a room. What this should probably do, like I was saying, like it should call the leave on the current stream that's happening, but we might need to also clean up a lot of other stuff. Like this is a promise, so we might need to wait on that. But what other things? So channel ref, I think, was used for RTM. Yeah, that was used for RTM. I'm actually going to move that closer to the RTM code, so it's kind of more closely connected. But connect to Agora RTC. Like this thing probably should also return the client or something. Which it does return. It returns tracks and clients right now. So like this thing, like we could potentially keep track of the client, RTC client ref current is equal to client. We're going to do the same thing down here, just so that we can like clean it up before we decide to connect to a brand new channel. Go ahead and do that. And I need to make sure I pull out that into a ref somewhere where we call like use ref. Now, I don't know what RTC client is going to be. Let me start closing some of these stuff. So this will be an Agora RTC client. Agora RTC client. Now, where does that need to be imported from? Agora RTC client. That probably needs to be coming from that. And then when we try to call connect to a room, we basically just need to say like if RTC client dot current is defined, then RTC client ref dot current dot leave. And then we should probably also clean up the set them audio should probably be defined. Set them video should be undefined. Set my video, make that undefined as well. Go ahead and just do that at the top here. So, I mean, there's probably something that we're going to be forgetting here, but I think just doing some type of cleanup will make this better so that it can actually like load in the new webcam stuff. So again, I'll make 3 tabs. Start chatting on 1, that's 6.3a. Start chatting 6.3a. Okay, well, I guess I'll read off the last one. So this is 7.3.9, 7.3.4. If I connect again, 7.3.9. So these two are connected now. This one is not connected to anybody. If I click next, this is connecting to, oh, they went to a new room. I'm looking for 3.4. Okay, let's see if this person can connect to that one. Ends with 4.3. 7.4D. Okay, I think these two are connected now, and this person, no one was connected to him. So if I can get a 7.3.9 connected, I think what we also need to do, if someone were to leave your room, I think we need to change the status back to waiting. Because now you have a chat room that's literally just sitting there, and I don't think anyone can ever connect to it, but it's stuck in the state of waiting. So I think we probably need to do like, if currently these are defined, then we should probably like set room to waiting. And then we could basically have a function up here which would hit an endpoint to set that back to waiting. So I'll say function set room to waiting, room ID is a string. And we're going to go ahead and just call or an endpoint, rooms with room ID. And it could be a method of post. And then we'd have to go to our API, because I don't think we have one for this route. So I'm going to rename this one to, I think, the index.ts. Oops. Index.ts. I'm going to move this one up. Then I'm going to make a new one, room ID ts. And if you do a post request, I'll just say a put request on this. What it's going to do is it is going to hopefully make the status and put it to waiting. So I could basically say await room find by ID and update. And then we're going to say room ID. And then we're going to say status of waiting. And that's it. And this will be a room ID. Okay, so hopefully I didn't break anything. I think everything should still work as is. But now, like, I'd have to basically do a put request here. And it's kind of hard-coded. Like, we're not doing proper rest. It's just hard-coded to change the status room to waiting. But I just want to see if this thing will work. And then we don't have room. I'd have to say room dot underscore ID. Object is possibly undefined. So if room is defined, then we are going to go ahead and just that. How's that? All right, moment of truth again. Let's refresh this page and let's go ahead and make a couple more. And I'm also going to delete my collections, because I think I have a bunch of like stale rooms sitting around. All right, 755, go ahead and connect. 755, go ahead and connect. I get a new room, 75A. So if I were to basically click next on this tab, I should go to 75A. Okay. And then this person should have been cleaned up because there's no one talking to them anymore. And that room is still sitting there just waiting. Now, if I were to click next, he should leave 75A and he should go back to 755. And it didn't work. It took me 2 clicks to do that for some reason. I don't know why. Let's try it again. I should disconnect and then I should go to 75A. So is that actually hitting the endpoint to connect the status, update the status properly? I am getting some errors. API resolve without sending a response for room put. Yeah, so I guess the issue is that like I didn't even return anything. So I should have said like res.status of 200.json success. Just so like the UI isn't stuck and can actually like redo. I do notice that my computer kind of slows down when I have all these different webcams being read from. So I do have to like make sure I delete them. Like close out of my tabs and stuff. All right, let's try it a couple times. All right, start chatting, start chatting, start chatting. The first two should have connected to the same room. That looks good. This one should be sitting off on its island all by itself. And if I were to leave this one and click next, it should connect to this guy over here. And then if I click next, it should connect to this guy over here. And I think there's an edge case where if this guy were to close his browser, like you'd have this room that's just stuck in waiting. So if I actually did that, let's just close this one. What happens? So now they're both. So I think at this point you just click next and like you'd have to find the next person to connect to maybe. Yeah, they're both just in a broken state, but they'll find each other at some point, I believe. I'm looking for 7.2. Will it connect to 7.2? I don't know why this person's not... Let me just look at the collection real quick and see, like, is there something in here that I can find? So this one's stuck in chatting for some reason. When I click next, I mean, what it should do... You know, maybe I have this a little bit backwards because I changed the room to waiting when I leave. Which means you have a chance of getting it back again. So like, I wonder if what we actually want to do instead is instead of doing it here, that room to waiting, like we probably want to do it after we've gotten the random room because we don't want to get the same room again, right? So let's just go ahead and do that after and see if that potentially fixes that little edge case. Refresh both these pages. Start chatting, start chatting. And then when I click next, like there should be no more rooms waiting, so I should make a new one. And the other one should have been set to, like they should be both on waiting now. Yeah, so now if I were to click next, I should change this previous room to waiting. And I should join the other person's room, I think. And then that'll create a new room. It should kind of just toggle back and forth between the empty room and the next room. Now there's probably an edge case where like if there's only one person in the room and then someone left the room, like we should probably just like delete the room entirely. Like no, it doesn't need to be status waiting anymore. It could be like closed. Open up a new room here, start chatting. 7BB. So this is connected to its own little room. This one when I join. Anyway, I mean, I think it's pretty good. It's a pretty good prototype, and I do like what we have right now. I'm gonna commit this. I'm gonna say getting users to connect to each other. Go ahead and add all those changes and sync those up. Now I want to try to get this deployed to Vercel real quick, just to verify if like this stuff works. Go ahead and log in. I think I have an account with GitHub. So once I'm in Vercel, I'm gonna go ahead and click add new project. And then we're gonna import that new project that we just did, which was called Omegle. I need to add it. Select repositories, only select repositories. I'm gonna say Omegle clone, save that. So now the Omegle clone should work here and I can import it. And then I'm gonna set up some environment variables. I just need to make these match my .env and I think it should work. So like the Mongo URI could be set to this. Add that in. Let's do the next public Agora API. And add that one in. And then finally the Agora app cert, which I'll add that one in. And then click deploy and let's see what happens. Now it is failing about like the implicit any. No implicit any, false. Like I don't care. There can be an implicit any. Allow any. I'll just do that. So it's failing because like there's just some TypeScript errors, which hopefully that's the only one. I just want to get this thing deployed. And once you had it configured, I mean, it should basically start automatically kicking off deployments and stuff. So if I go to my dashboard and go to my Omegle clone, it should kick off. npm run build failed. It's failing because this thing is still failing. So let's go back and figure out why this is failing. Overload 1 of 3 URI callback argument string undefined is not accessible. So this thing I just need to make sure it's defined. And that should fix that issue. Try it again. This is building. All right, so I just had to fix a couple of TypeScript errors, but now it looks like I have a domain that's deployed. And let's actually, I'm gonna load this up on my other computer. All right, so I'm gonna click start chatting, and on my other laptop to my left here, if everything works fine, it should ask me for my webcam and camera, and then we should be able to connect to, hopefully. Well, for some reason it made different rooms, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and just click next so I can get to the same chat room. So there you go. I got a webcam over here on my left, and then I got this one going, and I can actually start loading up different tabs, and we could probably alternate. So this is 7D9. Click this one. 682. There we go. So it's a little bit buggy. We're gonna have to figure out some error handling with actually figuring out the issues with that. But we can actually start talking to each other. So like this one, I can type on my other laptop. There you have it. We actually can send messages to each other, and we can actually talk with the audio. I do have the audio turned off. But yeah, that's basically as far as I want to take this little prototype project. And I think this is a good start if anyone else wanted to kind of continue on where I left off with this Agora chat room Omegle clone. So be sure to like, subscribe, click the bell icon, and leave comments if you liked watching this video. And also I have a Discord channel if you want to kind of talk to me directly, or just join a Discord to get help. If you're stuck learning how to code, we have some users here on my Discord who are willing to help you out. All right, have a good day and happy coding.